so that in case. So what were these people trying to prove or disprove by this research?
Good afternoon, madam.
Good afternoon, Anthony.
I think they were just trying to show how multitasking with IT affects the productivity or the amount of pleasure people have. Or does it affect it or it doesn't? So I think that's what they were just trying to.
They were trying to. Sorry.
Communicate.
They're trying to communicate that. They're trying to prove that it sorry.
They were trying to prove that how multitasking with IT, what effect does it have on the productivity or the amount of pleasure?
The amount of pleasure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Almost there. Yes. Anyone else?
Good afternoon, madam.
Yes, good afternoon.
Okay. I think the author was trying to discuss the benefits and drawbacks of multitasking with information technologies.
Benefits and drawbacks, is that it? Is that what they're trying to communicate?
Yeah, it's what I got.
Is that what they were trying to communicate, benefits? What would be the point of telling us about benefits and drawbacks? Because that's really not research in its essence, telling us benefits of something. Is that what they were trying to communicate?
Good afternoon, madam.
Yes, please.
Okay, according to me, the authors were trying to prove that pleasure can be got when multitasking at the same time with IT is like when it is avoided.
Sorry, I have not got it. They are trying to do what exactly? I've not yet.
Okay, the authors are trying to prove that someone can derive pleasure when he or she has limited access to multitasking at the same time with IT.
I've not yet got you clearly. Okay, let me just share my screen. And we're just looking at the abstract part. Let's start with the first sentence. Multitasking with information technology may impact how much pleasure people experience during hedonic activities, especially multisensory activities that involve touching, listening, and watching. How much pleasure people experience during hedonic activities. That is pleasurable activities, especially multisensory activities. For example, with a smartphone, if I'm playing a game that involves me moving my hand, that's a pleasurable if I'm listening to music, if I'm watching something, a video, how much pleasure people get from it. How much pleasure people get from it. But when you, already it's pleasurable if I'm just watching, if I'm on WhatsApp, if I am listening to a video, a recording, if I'm watching something or I'm playing a game, and then I'm doing another activity. Okay? I'm doing another activity, let us say reading an assignment or teaching. Yeah? Then they go further. They say, past research on IT multitasking has primarily focused on utilitarian professional contexts. By utilitarian, they were just trying to prove or disprove that multitasking or gives pleasure. But now for this particular case, they were testing hypotheses. Yeah? They were testing hypotheses. We can look at the hypothesis here. We have research questions up there, then we have hypothesis. Let me see if I can pull it out. A multisensory hedonic experience generates more positive emotional valence compared to unisensory activity. A multi-hedonic activity generates lower emotional arousal compared to a unisensory activity. So what is the objective of all of these? They were proving these are hypotheses they were testing to see that if you're doing many of these activities at the same time, you get more pleasure out of it. And if you're getting more pleasure out of it, that means you're not concentrating on the primary activity. So let me just give you an example. If I'm on WhatsApp and I'm driving, what effect does that have on my driving?
Madam, you may get an accident.
Exactly. So these people's research was primarily supporting things like laws, which say do not use your phone and drive. Do not play games while you're doing some other, maybe operating machinery or something like that. These people's research was proving, it wasn't just talking about advantages and disadvantages, it was giving scientific proof that carrying out these tasks while you're multitasking with these hedonic experiences will increase your pleasurable feeling and reduce your ability to focus on the one activity you're supposed to focus on by trying to test these hypotheses. So have you understood the purpose of their research? This is what research in its purest sense is meant for. In its purest sense, this is research that is answering a real world problem. Yeah? It proves, let's say it shows, for example, imagine if there was somebody who was caught using their phone and they were driving. and the person was arrested and they went to court and the person was trying to say, oh, no, it doesn't matter. I can do both at the same time. This research says no. And a lawyer, a judge can even use this research as a basis to either have the person arrested or the person do time or the person pay a fine or whatever it is. Because this research proves with scientific data that you can't do two things, you can't do more than one thing at the same time, especially when you're one of those things you're doing is increasing your feeling of pleasure. Okay? Familiarize yourself with this article. We're going to get a lot of other things from this article and other articles. So continue reading from them. At a certain point, I will ask you about what the research problem was, what the research gap was. I will ask you what methodology they used, what data collection tools they used, and so on, and their results. So continue to familiarize yourself with this, and also with what type of research approach they used. Okay? Okay, let's do a new share. Yeah, this is our next topic we're looking at, which is research philosophy. The slides are already there on Moodle. You can access them. And if you also look at the ebooks I gave you, they also cover this topic. So let's look at research philosophy. So now, this particular topic is very generic in nature, not specific. You will not find your research saying, oh, I'm going to use this research philosophy or that research philosophy, but you will imply it, you will have it at the back of your mind. Now, let me start by asking, what is a philosophy? What is a philosophy? What is a philosophy?
Madam, I think a philosophy is something that is said, a certain quote or a certain saying that is made about a certain.
Sorry, you broke off. You did I didn't hear the complete answer.
Madam, I think a philosophy is a certain saying or a certain quote about a certain thing or a certain topic.
Okay. Anyone else? Yes, Lukoma.
Madam, I think philosophy is like any activity done to understand like the truth about ourselves or something in our society.
Truth about ourselves or in our society. Anyone else?
Madam, according to me, it is a study of basic ideas about knowledge, truth, or something, right or wrong.
Okay. Anyone else? Here I've just Googled and seeing something here, the study of the fundamental nature of knowledge, reality and existence, especially when considered as an academic discipline. Another one says, a theory or attitude that acts as a guiding principle for behavior. So one, it could be a study. There are the people who study philosophy. We have some philosophers from history, Socrates, Plato. I'm sure you've heard about some of these. So it can be the study of the fundamental nature of knowledge, reality, and existence. I've had several philosophers talk about life in talks. For example, I had a philosopher who was talking about human, on what is referred on humanity, what it means to be human. And specifically, he talked about the human body and how if you look at the nature of the human body, every single body part was created for a purpose. For example, your mouth was created for a purpose. You use it to speak, you use it to eat, to taste. It has a specific purpose. So when we see you misuse your mouth, for example, if we see you eating stones, what do we say? If a philosopher says we have looked at human beings, each body part has a purpose. For example, the mouth has a purpose for eating food. And then we see you eating stones. What do we say?
That person is abnormal.
That person has what, sorry?
That person is abnormal.
Yeah, we say you have a disorder because you're not following the proper order of things. Now you realize that what brought about that guiding principle is philosophy. Philosophy is telling us that studying the human person, the human body, we realize every body part has a specific purpose. And the minute you see someone misusing that purpose, that the person we say has a disorder. Okay, so that is philosophy guiding in its truest sense. So also in research, we have philosophies that guide, yeah? And directly or indirectly, you will select a philosophy that will guide your research. So what are we going to look at specifically? We're going to look at the three major philosophical viewpoints in research, these that I'm circling: positivist, interpretivist, and realist. These are the three major guiding principles in research. So in other words, the viewpoint that you're going to use as you look at your specific research problem. After these three, you have two approaches that emerge: deductive and inductive. Yeah, the approach that you'll use to tackle your research problem. Okay. Once we've selected the approach, we then select our research strategies or research methods. So research strategies are also referred to as research methods. Yeah. We shall look at validity and reliability, not necessarily in this lecture, but a little bit later. Then also a bit later, we shall look at the ethical issues surrounding selecting a particular research strategy. Yeah, let me look at a comment. I think it's okay. So we're going to look at what we refer to as the research onion. So the research onion gives you a guidance of how you start from the top, the very top, the philosophy, moving inwards to your research tools. Your research philosophy is guided by your research problem. There isn't one starts the other. There are situations where someone says, okay, what should be my research approach? The question is, what is your research problem? And then how do you intend to deal with it? Like I said, your research, your writing may not state that, oh, this is my research philosophy. But in the back of your head, it will be guiding you. Okay? Just like daily, we don't walk around saying, this is the philosophy on humanity. So therefore I must eat. No, we already know we must eat. And we must eat for purposes of nutrition. Yeah, primarily purposes of nutrition. And the second is pleasure. Okay? But if I get up and say I'm going to ignore nutrition, I'm just going to focus on pleasure, again, you come to a disorder. Yeah? So there are also people, your guiding principle may misguide, but let's look at the research onion. So we start with the topmost, the research philosophy. So we have two major ones, positivism and phenomenology. Positivism and interpretivism. So phenomenology is the same as interpretivism. The third one, realism, is a combination of the two, positivism and phenomenology. We're going to look at each in detail. Once we've selected our research philosophy, we move to the second layer, which is our research approach. And here we look at deductive or inductive, the approach that we shall use to tackle our research problem. We come to the third layer, which is our research strategies, our research methods. Okay, we shall also look at these in detail. After our research strategy or method, we come to the second innermost layer, which is when we pick the timeline, the time in which we're going to do our research, cross-sectional or longitudinal. Let me give you an example of longitudinal research. I saw a research on BBC where there were a group of scientists who observed children from the age of 0 to 5 years. Yeah? Age of 0, a group of children. So imagine a group of scientists who go and ask mothers and a group of mothers and fathers who are going to give birth. And they say, we would like to observe your child from the time they're 0 years to that point they are 5 years. Whatever it was they were researching, I think it was maybe behavior development and other things. So that is longitudinal research that is looking over a certain length of space of time. Now, of course, we don't expect any of you at this stage to go through that kind of research. The second is cross-sectional research, where you pick a specific section in time when you do your research. So for example, let us say individually, you'll do your research maybe between 2023 to 2024. Pick data between that time, and it's relevant for that time. Okay? Maybe it's done in 6 months, 7 months, whatever it is. That is cross-sectional research. Then the innermost circle is when we pick our data collection tools. Our data collection tools. This is the innermost circle where you say, I'm going to use interviews or questionnaires. I'm going to carry out observation, observing participants, or observing documents, whatever it is. This is our innermost circle. So our research starts from the outer going to the inner. We never start from the inner going to the outer. So we start with a research philosophy going inwards. So the research philosophy is really a guiding principle in our research. Sorry, let me first remove this. Okay. Now, the first research philosophy, positivism. Before I start discussing it, can someone just Google it and tell us what you see?
Excuse me, madam.
Yes, please.
You want it like a definition or?
Yeah, tell us what you see.
Okay. Here it says that philosophical theory that holds all genuine knowledge in either true by definition or positive.
Is either true by definition or positive.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any other thoughts? What do you think about that response? All genuine knowledge is either true by definition or positive. What do we mean when we say something like that? Another one says positivism relies heavily on objectivity and so dismisses the importance of individual subjective experience and values. That's very good. Let me just give you a live example. Let us say I send a question to you right now. Yeah? Let us say to each one of you, I send a question and I tell you respond to me with either yes or no. Let me just pick one person in this class, Joel Atwaire. And I send each one of I send a broadcast question to you now with a yes or no. And then I ask a question. Joel Atwaire is a handsome man. Is a handsome young man. Yes or no? Okay? I send it to all of you. And then all of you send me your responses privately. Okay? And then when you send your responses, I tabulate. I don't reveal that maybe Tony said this or Fahad said this. No. I just simply give a yes or no. And all of you respond back yes or no. I go ahead and tabulate. And then I find maybe 60% said yes. Okay? 60% said yes. And by virtue of the positivist approach, if we were to go back to the definition here, let me just go back to a definition here. Positivist relies heavily on objectivity and so dismisses the importance of individual subjective experiences and values. So if 60% have said yes, then we conclude, yes, Joel is a handsome young man. Okay? Because 60%, the majority have said yes, we can therefore conclude Joel is a handsome young man. We can say, okay, let us be a little bit more precise. We can say, let me send another broadcast where I say, I give varying degrees of responses, where I say, what is that? There's a certain scale. There's a certain scale. I forget the official name, but there's highly. Is it highly agree? What is that scale? Let me first Google it quickly. Just give me a minute, so I give you an accurate scale.
Madam, it's strongly.
Yes, sorry. Strongly agree. There is strongly agree. Agree. You can put neutral, but let's leave neutral out. Let's put strongly agree, agree, do not agree, strongly disagree. Okay? Those four. And I send again. Then the responses come. We calculate them, and they strongly agree, let's say 5%. They agree maybe 6%. The disagree are 10%. And the strongly disagree are 15%. Now, based on that, we can then therefore conclude Joel is not, because the majority lie in the disagree and strongly disagree. We can say the majority, because the majority said that therefore Joel is not a handsome young man. Okay? Do we understand the way positivism works?
No, madam, I haven't understood. You can pardon for me.
What have you not understood?
The really positivism that you have been talking about.
What have you not understood? Have you not understood how we came to the conclusion whether Joel is a handsome man or not?
Yes, I haven't.
You have not understood why? How we came to the conclusion that, okay, why? The last example I gave, when I said, if I said the majority of the responses were in do not agree, and strongly do not agree, the majority. And therefore we make that conclusion. Can somebody else explain that? How we came to, we wanted to answer the question, is Joel a handsome young man? Okay? We want to answer that question. We wanted to answer that question. Is Joel a handsome young man? And therefore, I send out a question to all of you with four responses. Okay, let me just let me first stop sharing here, and I'm just going to type out something. Let me see what I can get. Let me just type this out. Is Joel Atuhaire a handsome young man? And then I give you option 1, strongly agree. Two, agree. And 3, disagree. And 4, strongly disagree. Okay, now I'm going to share my screen. Do you all see that question, eh? Do you all see the question?
No.
Yes, madam.
Yes, madam.
Who are those that don't see?
I'm not seeing the question, madam.
What are you using to view, are you using your phone?
Yes.
And you can't see this at all, eh? You can't
At
see
first
the
I saw
screen?
it, but now
Can you now see?
yes, I can now see.
Okay. So you see the question. Imagine I send this question to all of you.
Madam.
Okay. I send it to all of you, then each one of you picks a response. We want an answer. Is Joel Atuhaire a handsome young man? That is the question we are posing to everyone. Now, the way I am posing this question, I am stating that I will make a judgment on whether Joel is a handsome young man based on your responses. Do you get what I'm saying? I will make a judgment. We shall make a judgment on whether Joel is a handsome young man based on your responses. I'm assuming that the majority of the responses will determine whether Joel is a handsome young man. Norman, I think it was you who was asking that question. Eh? Was it Norman?
Yes.
Yes. The positivist approach I am taking, we are saying that genuine knowledge is true and it is considered to be objective. Now, the fact that I've sent it to a number of you who I assume have seen Joel and can therefore make judgment on whether he is a handsome young man or not. So basing on the responses, the majority of the responses will determine whether Joel is a handsome young man or not. If the majority say lie between strongly agree and agree, if the majority of the responses lie between that, therefore we can say, Joel, we can make a judgment that it is true, Joel is a handsome young man. Norman, have you got the point here? I've got
the point, madam.
Yeah, how the positivist approach makes a decision. Yeah? on what is true, what is considered to be true or positive knowledge. If the majority say no, then we make a judgment that Joel is not a handsome young man. If the majority say no, then we make a judgment or we conclude that Joel is not a handsome young man. Okay?
Okay, madam.
Yeah, that is the positivist approach. So with positivism, we make generalizations at the end. Because the majority have said this, that's the generalization we can make. You've had situations where they say boys perform better at math than girls. Normally, it's done with statistical analysis. Yeah, they will pick data from UNEB, from primary level living examination to O level to A level, and they will find out of how many of the number of students, let's say from between 1980 to 1989, how many got above 50% in mathematics? Of these that got above 50%, how many were boys? How many were girls? They can even divide it further and say, how many of these were boys from urban schools and boys from rural schools? How many from girls from urban schools? Things like that. And basing on that, they make a generalization saying boys perform better at mathematics than girls. Or they will say, you'll have a generalized statement saying they are predominantly male in the IT field than females. Again, they carry out statistical analysis. They will go to universities or institutions of higher learning and find out how many IT graduates are male, how many are female. They will go to the workplace and find out how many IT professionals are male and others are female. And based on that statistical analysis, they will say men are more, maybe men are more in the IT field than women. Men are stronger in the IT field than women. Making such generalizations. Yeah. So they consider that the one that comes out more is then considered the positive. The one that must be reported and must be taken as the law or the truth. Okay? It deals with quantifiable observations, things that you can count. Quantifiable observations. Have you understood, or do we have any questions so far? Please ask, don't hesitate to ask. Shamira, you have a question? Yes, please.
Yes. Should we take it like positivism, like depends on quantitative methods?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a very good question, Shamira. That's a very, very good question. So so in other words, when we later on talk about qualitative research and quantitative research, positivism is quantitative research. Things that are countable, that are observable. Now, there's usually a fight between the positivists and interpretivists of qualitative and quantitative research. Those are usually just political fights. Don't get involved in those. There's none that is above the other. All have their place in research. The second is interpretivism or phenomenology. Now, let me ask a simple question. I asked a question, I said, I gave you the example of Joel being a handsome young man. Okay? And I asked that question. Now, let us say I decided to make an analysis of those who said do not agree. How many of them were female? How many were male? What's the likelihood a fellow man is going to call his fellow man handsome?
Unless they are gay.
No, but come on, you can still also appreciate. We women appreciate if your fellow woman is beautiful, but anyway, but it's still the truth. But most of the time, a fellow man may not come out outward and say, "Oh, my fellow man is handsome." So if we were to carry that out, already that in itself creates what we call a subjective response. Yeah? A subjective response. There is a social construction. Like what, who said that unless he's gay? Who said that? Already. Who said that? That for a fellow man to say, already that is a social construct. A social construct that makes a man's response towards such a question biased already. Yeah, meaning a man's judgment of whether Joel is handsome or not is not going to be necessarily objective. Ooh. What if there is a girl Joel broke her heart in this class? There's someone who Joel went and told ABCD, then afterwards went to someone else, went to another girl. Do you think she's going to call him handsome in this survey if I sent the question?
Yes, he can call him handsome, but just ignore the past things.
No. My dear, I'm a woman, eh? We know ourselves. At that point, if it were me, I would say he's very ugly. If he had broken my heart, my response would be, no, Joel is not a handsome man. So already that is also another subjective response. Okay? So probably that question may not have been a good one for quantitative research. But still, we can still have that kind of question. Maybe we can go and see what is socially defined as handsome. Is Joel of a certain height, certain physical structure? What is considered handsome? But then again, that's also subjective. What one society says is handsome is not what another society says is handsome. So here comes the opposite, interpretivism, where they say reality is a social construction. Reality is socially constructed. Now, if we were to look at research itself, look at business, where IT people, where we operate, we say business situations are not only complex, they are unique, and a particular set of it is defined by a particular set of circumstances and individuals. Take an example. Most private universities quickly adapted to online learning during the COVID-19 pandemic. That wasn't the case for public universities, especially Makerere. Did anyone observe that? Actually, for Makerere, I have two nieces there, where even the lecturers themselves, after the university management passed it as a directive that they were supposed to have online learning during the pandemic, during the lockdown, the lecturers themselves refused. Actually, during the second outbreak, the second wave, the time when the Delta virus really came out and hit and many people died, I remember two of my nieces were saying that whereas they gave the directive, the lecturer would say, me, I'm meeting you in class. If you don't want to come, you're not receiving anything. Now imagine a directive was given right from the president, National Council for Higher Learning, the management of Makerere was given, but still you had individual lecturers who said no. Whereas in other situations, in like a university like UMU, that was adopted. UMU, UCU, those quickly adopted. Now, these are all universities. Yeah, understand this in terms of a business situation, in terms of an academic learning context. They are all academic learning context. They all have teaching and learning processes. But you see that the contexts were different. The complexities that come with the two are quite different. The ability, let's say, for a lecturer at Makerere to say no, we've seen it time and time again when lecturers at will stand up and say, we're not going to teach, where students get up and say, we're not going to learn at any given time, whereas it's quite different in a private institution. So whereas there are similar situations, they are still not the same. The social constructs in a public university are not the same social constructs in a private university. So if someone was researching, let's say, on adoptability of e-learning platforms during the COVID-19 pandemic, if they went in to try and discover what were the things that could make or break adoption of e-learning, you'd find the situations are quite different. Just sending out a questionnaire was not enough, would not be enough. Probably someone would need to sit down with those rebellious lecturers privately to find out, why is it you're rebelling? A questionnaire would not reveal the answers to those questions. A lecturer, let me just give you an example. A lecturer at Makerere, whether he or she teaches, that lecturer is assured of, especially when they're on government, they're assured of their salary, whether they teach or they don't teach, whether students come to class or they don't come to class. But a lecturer at UMU knows that if I don't get students enrolled, if students don't learn, I'm not getting my salary. Do you see the complexities there? Do you see the different situations where a questionnaire may not, the quantitative, or rather the positivist approach may not give you an accurate answer? Hello?
Yes, madam.
Was I talking to anyone or I lost you all?
Yes, madam, we are hearing you.
Okay.
Madam, we are hearing you.
Did you understand what the interpretivism approach or phenomenology or philosophy guides on? Did you understand that point? Hello?
Yes, madam.
Yes, madam.
Have you understood?
According to what I fixed in it, it's like the way it's someone's view. Let me say, depending on which perspective, like that person looks at a situation. So me may ask for my opinion, and I give you something. Like I answer according to my perspective, the way I view that thing, or the way I take it to be. Then another person also gives on that same thing and a view according to his or her own perspective.
Okay.
So that's about that.
Okay. Norman, it's almost a yes or no response, I would say. Yes, it is true you're giving an opinion, but I also want to say this. If I had sent you that question of Joel being handsome or not, you'd all be giving me your perspective, your opinion. But the difference with interpretivism, we want to get the interpretation of let us say, if I was to take the interpretivism approach with the question I've just given you on Joel, maybe if I sat down with each one of you and said, why do you, let's say if somebody said, yes, I think Joel is handsome. That is somebody giving me their opinion. But if I want to get to interpretivism, I would ask, why do you think Joel is handsome? Someone might say, oh, I think he's handsome because he's always pleasant when I talk to him. Another person will say, oh, I think he's handsome because I think his accent is very nice. When he speaks, really, oh, it's the best thing I've heard. Another person will say, me, I think he's not handsome because he speaks very rudely to me every time I speak to him, or he doesn't greet. Another person might say, Joel doesn't like bathing. That's why I think he's not handsome. So that is the interpretivism approach. Someone explains why. They give their interpretation of a particular phenomena.
Excuse me, madam.
Yes, please.
Yes, I need some highlight on like the focus of interest and the goal of the research. This principle.
For this particular principle.
Yes, madam.
Now, normally, now this is where the difference between the two come. Normally, when we carry out interpretivism research, we know little or nothing about a phenomena. We want to have a complete understanding, a better understanding about why something is being done. I'll give you an example. Have all of you heard about female genital mutilation or female circumcision?
Yes, madam.
Now, you all know that it is criminalized in Uganda. It is outlawed. One is not supposed to circumcise women. Are you all aware of that?
Yes, madam.
Are you also aware that in spite of the fact that it has been criminalized or banned, women, not men, women continue to carry this out on their own daughters, and even women take themselves to be circumcised?
Yes, madam.
Are you aware that it is a brutal and inhumane act on any woman's body? Yet it's continuously being done, and by women. So the question is, why? So researchers ask the question, why are women themselves still taking themselves there? Why? So some researchers, social science researchers, I remember there was one particular woman who went and spent time with a community that carries it out. And she spent months, she stayed there with them, she stayed in their homes, made friends with them, cooked with them, went to the garden with them, did all that, all in a bid to understand, for women to interpret, for her to understand what is it that motivates them. What is it that motivates them to carry out this hideous action? There was a documentary I saw of a woman who grew up, she didn't carry it out. She was not circumcised. She went to school, became a teacher, but as an adult, she made a decision to go and be circumcised. And the reason she gave, she said she just wasn't fitting in the community. She had been pushed out. So for the sake of belonging, she went ahead and had it done. So you see, but it's only that kind of research where someone takes time to understand. If you give that person a questionnaire, you would never be able to understand what is it that motivates people to move towards this phenomena of FGM. Okay? There was no way an outsider. There was no, let's take an example of in my tribe, I'm a Mtoro, that act is not done. So there's no way for me as a woman, I would have been able to answer that question to other scientists. But only women who go through it could answer that question. And it needs somebody to sit down with that person to discover, to uncover. It takes time to make friends with them, to talk with them and things like that. To get the interpretation from the perspective of the person who is going through it. So it wasn't just an opinion. It was to understand what is it that motivates one to do A, B, C, D. Shamira, have I answered your question?
Yes, madam, very well.
Okay, so that is the interpretivism approach. Yeah, the interpretivism approach. I can also give myself as an example for research I did in the field of ICT. I did research in the field of ICT for D, that is ICT for development. And I wanted to look at sustainability. If you have a poor context, a rural context, and you come and implement, what are the things that are of value to a poor person as opposed to somebody who has the financial means? For example, if an app was created for a smartphone, for whatever purpose, maybe it's for healthcare, it's very easy for the urban elite to adopt it because number one, they have smartphones. Number two, they have the resources. If it needs access to the internet, if it needs whatever it is, they can use it. It's very different for a person in the rural areas. So now let's imagine Ministry of Health implements an application for healthcare to support healthcare access. What are the chances of a poor person using SMS? So I spent time with a rural community in Nkozi. About 2 years. I spent time with them, talked with them, or I ate with them as they were doing any workshops, I was with them. And in that time, I uncovered a lot of things about rural mobile phone users. Take an example. I had at that time, that was 2013, 2014. At that time, I had no idea that majority of rural users can't even use SMS. Actually, it was during the trainings that we realized that an old man said, for me, the only thing I can do is make a call and end the call. Beyond that, I can't use SMS. something like, but it had to take me time to spend time with them. There was no way I was going to give them a questionnaire and I was going to find out about that, to find out who a rural user is. Yeah, I'll also give you an article later on. I'll share with you an article about, it was research done in an organization where they were using groupware applications like WhatsApp, where they implemented it in an organization to help top management communicate. So take an example, you implement WhatsApp so that top management at UMU can communicate. But the reason why they implemented it was that they found that a lot of these applications, while everyone knew they could support communication for top management, they were at the same time failing. So they wanted to find out in a particular context, what was it that was making it fail? And they found out that ICT was frustrating the actions because they had not been involved in the implementation. But that because they decided to take an interpretivism approach, or rather philosophical outlook to the research, to understand the underlying issues that motivate or demotivate adoption. I hope I've explained a bit more, especially in the IT perspective. I'll also give you the other side for IT on quantitative, but you've actually already seen a quantitative research in the article that I gave you, but I'll also give you another example. So let's move forward. Realism.
Excuse me, madam.
Yes, please.
We also take it like this principle depends on qualitative methods, for example, observations and interviews.
Aha, exactly.
Okay.
Okay. So the third philosophical outlook is realism. So realism, what it does, it combines positivism and interpretivism. Yeah. This is where somebody says, I'm going to use a mixture of the two to get from both perspectives. In my research, that's why you hear people say, I'm using mixed methods. Yeah. You may find, like I gave you the example of Joel. If I sent out the question, is Joel a handsome young man? And you all give your responses. Then I sit down with maybe 10 of you individually and I say, why do you think he's handsome? I get the other perspective. Or why people may think he is or he's not handsome. And then we make a conclusion at the end. Yeah, that is the mixed method approach. So you find someone is saying, I'm going to use a questionnaire predominantly, then give some interviews. Another person will say, my first objective, I will use qualitative approach predominantly. I'll interview people, I'll observe them, then I'll give a questionnaire at the end just to confirm that what I saw in observations and interviews is actually what people also think. That is where somebody uses, that is realism, combining the two approaches, or rather the two philosophies. Now, from philosophies, we come to approaches, the second layer of the onion. That is deductive and inductive. And both are derived from the two philosophical approaches. Now, deductive, the word deductive. How many of you have watched or know the literary character Sherlock Holmes? Lukoma, you've heard about Sherlock Holmes?
Yes, he's a detective or some sort.
Yes. And the approach he normally uses to come to conclusions about things, that is normally referred to as the deductive approach. So Sherlock Holmes, for instance, you walk into his house, he looks at your feet, he looks at your shoes, maybe they have dust, and then he says they are doing construction on this road. That means you came via this road. You look a bit sweaty, meaning you found maybe heavy traffic or something where you ran for the train. That meant you are late. You are a bit late doing this. Your collar looks a bit dirty, meaning you passed through this area where there is salt and something, things like that. Maybe there is some food on stain. That means maybe you poured food on that kind of approach where he sees A, B, C, D, and then makes a conclusion. This is the day you had, and this is what you passed through. This is where you passed, and things like that. That is they call it deducive. I forget the term, but basically making a conclusion based on the evidence that is being seen. So the deductive approach starts with a theory. Okay? Now I'm going to immediately take you to Google. I'm going to ask all of you to go to Google and search for term theory. Term theory, TAM. It could be term theory, term model.
Is it technology acceptance model?
Yes. Can someone tell me what you've seen?
This is an information systems theory that models how users come to accept the use of a technology.
So term basically says you can predetermine whether a system is going to be adopted or not. Yeah, whether a system will be adopted or not. I'm just going to show you, I'm just going to share with you a screen. Now, do you see that screen? It has some sample questions based on term. So let us say someone, a researcher, one of you is doing research to determine if his or her system that they've designed will be adopted. And they implement it. You can even put it in the lab. You get users to come and use it, then you give them a questionnaire. Look at these questions. Using this product, let's say it is an app or whatever it is, in my job, or it could be in my teaching, in my learning, would enable me accomplish tasks more quickly. Then the user, the person who has used the system, says extremely, quite, slightly, neither, slightly, quite, extremely. Or we can say this unlikely. likely or unlikely. Yeah, look at this scale. The way we had the same scale for Joel. We would say maybe this is likely, extremely likely, quite likely, slightly, neither, slightly unlikely, quite unlikely, extremely unlikely. So they use a response basing on these, this scale. The first scale, because term says, bases on two principles. The technology will be adopted if it is perceived to be useful. You see that? Perceived to be useful. So these questions here are to measure whether a user perceives a certain application or system is going to be useful or not. Okay, so far do we understand?
Yes, madam.
Yes, then the second, yes, please. Okay, I think that was a yes. The second set says, is trying to measure whether a user perceives the application is easy to use, ease of use. So the term model puts forward two hypotheses. It says a user will adopt a system if they perceive it, number one, useful, number two, easy to use. Those two perspectives. So these questions are to measure. And once you measure, that means you can, the researcher can then put forward and say, yes, this system will be adopted, no, this system will not be adopted. Okay? So far, do we understand?
Yes, we understand it.
Okay. So, when we see here that a hypothesis, with deductive approach, we start with a theory, which theory proposes a hypothesis, a certain, what is considered to be a truth, and that truth is then measured. Yeah, we start with a theory. Now, by the time any research has theory, it means it has been thoroughly researched. So, for example, by the time the term theory was created, a lot of research must have been done on adoption. A lot of research must have been done by the time that theory was created. So in other words, for one to do quantitative research, normally we do it when a lot of research has been done about something. So we simply want to prove or disprove something in a certain context. Yeah? Now, that theory, that hypothesis, when it is expressed, it's expressed in operational terms where you have two specific variables that you want to measure. For example, in the case of term, we are measuring a user's perceived usefulness, an application's perceived usefulness to a user, and an application's perceived ease of use. You're measuring those two variables. Okay? You have that hypothesis that you're measuring. You're trying to determine if something is useful or easy to use. Useful and easy to use. Those are the two hypotheses that you're measuring. So at the outcome, you either confirm or modify the theory. Either confirm or modify the theory. Okay? So far, do we have any question as far as deductive approach is concerned? Do we have any question as far as the deductive approach is concerned?
Madam, what I want to know,
Yes.
when do I use this approach?
You use this approach when your research is quantitative in nature. Number one, if
Okay.
your research is quantitative in nature. Of course, at this stage, it's quite rare that your research will go to this point at undergraduate level. That's quite rare. Here is an example of a case study. This is in a retail store, but however, we can take the IT perspective. I really don't want to give you social science examples, more of IT examples. Let's look at the inductive approach. You want to understand why something is happening. I gave you the example of FGM. Then I also gave you the example of the groupware applications, that groupware applications were being argued as something that could improve communication for top management. I'll just give you an example. I am on the board of a local factory here, tea factory here in Fort Portal. And the general manager created a WhatsApp group where with the directors and some members of management are part of this WhatsApp group. And normally the proper order of things, if let's say the factory needs to change prices, a board meeting must be organized, and it's debated, and the board gives management go ahead to say, look, let's change the price, either we increase or decrease. But there are times, because management needs to make a quick decision for the sake of competition, because there are other tea factories. The general manager will send out a request on the WhatsApp group saying that we are now in a very competitive environment. These factories have all increased. We really need to increase. And we, the directors, can say yes or no. Quickly, we can make a decision just on that WhatsApp group. So you already see a live example where a groupware application is being used to improve decision making and communication. Now, however, there's an article I'll share with you. In this particular article, it was done in 1995, where a groupware application was implemented. They say that many times when these applications are implemented, they don't work. And they were trying to propose that there must be something within that is causing the failure, because ordinarily these things should work. So this research, they put it in an organization, not for it to find out whether it works or not, but whether it is actually implemented. And they found out later that it was the application didn't have support from the ICT department. Primarily, and they found out later it was primarily because ICT felt they had been sidelined when it was being implemented, like their opinion was not sought after, or like what application should we use and things like that. So they refused to support it. So you see, in that particular situation, they were trying to understand why something was happening, why there was failure to implement. Yeah. Now there was no theory to explain why. The term theory would tell you, yes, the application is easy to use, but it couldn't tell you the organizational politics that were underlying. So this is the inductive approach, or the qualitative approach, which points to the interpretivism approach. Sorry. So unlike the inductive approach, which starts with theory, the deductive approach, which starts with theory coming to a generalization, this one starts with trying to understand something, you analyze data, and then you begin to formulate a theory. So normally the inductive approach, we have it when we have little or no understanding about something, and we want to build more understanding about a particular phenomena. Do we understand the inductive approach so far?
Yes.
Okay. So here is a list of major differences between the two. You can read through them in your own time. But I want to move to what approach would we select? Number one, we start with our research problem. Yeah. What type of research problem do we have? And we shall talk about research problems and how we know whether we're going qualitative or quantitative. Depending on the wealth of literature, if there's a lot of literature about something, then normally it should be the quantitative approach. For example, if one is researching about adoption, really there's a lot of literature on adoption. There's the term theory, there are many theories that talk about adoption. So it wouldn't make sense for one to go inductive in that sense. If there is little knowledge about something, then the inductive approach takes the center stage. Time. How much time do you have to do your research? Now, in terms of field research, quantitative approach takes very little time. You can hand out your questionnaires in 1 day and get a response, or in 2 months. Sometimes if you're going purely qualitative, it can take a lot of time. I gave you the example of my research, which took 2 years. However, let me also disclaim, also normal at undergraduate level, qualitative research also still doesn't take that much time, especially if you're just going to interview people, observe business processes, read documentation about business processes. It may not take that much time. So again, depending on your research method and research collection, the data collection tools, the qualitative approach doesn't have to take that much time. Risk. How much risk do you have? Yeah. Deductive approach has a lower risk strategy, much lower risk strategy, because number one, there are many ways to validate your questionnaires to ensure that you collect the right amount of data. With qualitative approach, you can find yourself going completely astray and pick up even the wrong data. However, I also want to state on the practical side that I did observe a PhD student who sent out questionnaires. Now, the thing about quantitative research is about quantity. If you don't have a certain minimum amount of questionnaires, you can't use that data. It's too little. For example, 50 is too little. Just to give you an example, 50 is too little. The more responses you have, the better. Now, I observed a PhD student who sent out questionnaires and she had a very low turn up. Very few people were responding. And this is where some people decide to sit down and forge data. They fill out their questionnaires themselves. That's a big no-no. Yeah. So those are the risks that will come out. The question of audience, who makes the research or who marks the research. Now, like I said, at undergraduate level, especially for you IT students, it's about building systems. So really, most of you won't go quantitative, and even if it's qualitative, it's not that far deep inside. So you look at the audience you're writing, to look at the type of dissertations that have been done in the IT department. The library has a collection of all of these, and I think they also have a collection of the best students. So have a look at those and they may guide you on the type of research that you can do. Why is the approach important? Ask yourselves questions. Why is the approach important? Because the approach helps you understand what your research strategy or method is going to be. Yeah. Is it possible to combine approaches? Which approach should I adopt? Those are all questions you will ask yourselves. So do we have any question so far about research approach? Do we have any question?
No, madam.
Okay. So with that in mind, okay, with that in mind, then we can end the lecture here. I'm going to post some more articles for you during the course of the week. And those will be the beginning point for discussion for our next lecture on Friday. Is that okay?
Yes, madam.
Okay. Okay. Have a good weekend, everyone.
Nice weekend too.
Okay.